Welcome to Session 3, PHP Data Types and Strings. In this session, we're going to learn some of the most important concepts that form the foundation of PHP programming. By the end of this session, you'll be able to, first, identify different data types in PHP and understand how they are used in real programs. Data types are essential because they tell PHP what kind of information you're working with. For example, whether it's a number, text, or a true or false value. Next, you'll learn about various string functions, numeric operations, and mathematical functions in PHP. These are powerful tools that help you perform operations like manipulating text, doing calculations, and processing data efficiently. Finally, you'll explore PHP constants and the functions used to create them. Constants are special variables whose values cannot be changed during script execution, and they are very useful when dealing with fixed data values. In summary, this session gives you a clear understanding of different PHP data types, their behavior, and how they can be used in your programs. You'll also get familiar with several math functions, and we'll conclude with an important discussion about string types in PHP, one of the most used data types in web development. Now that we've understood what this session covers, let's move on to Section 3.1, Data Types. In programming, a data type simply means the category or classification of data based on the kind of value it holds. For example, numbers, text, and true or false values all belong to different data types. In PHP, data types are very important, but here's something interesting. PHP is a loosely typed language. That means you don't have to manually tell PHP what type of data you are storing. Unlike some other programming languages, PHP automatically figures it out for you. For example, if you assign a number to a variable, PHP will automatically treat it as an integer. If you assign text inside quotation marks, PHP will recognize it as a string. So instead of declaring data types explicitly, PHP analyzes the value and determines the right type on its own. PHP comes with several standard data types, each having its own specific use and attributes. In the next part, we'll look at a table, Table 3.1, which lists some of these standard PHP data types along with examples. Now, let's take a look at Table 3.1, PHP data types. This table shows the most commonly used data types in PHP, along with their attributes and some examples to help you understand how each one works. The first data type is integer. An integer represents a whole number, meaning it doesn't contain any decimal or fractional part. For example, values like 30 or 69 are integers. In PHP, integers are used whenever you need to work with counting numbers, quantities, or mathematical operations that involve whole numbers only. Next, we have the float data type. A float, sometimes called a double or real number, represents numbers that have a decimal point. For instance, 1.5, 3.143, and 9.8 are examples of floating point numbers. These are very useful when you need precision. For example, in scientific calculations, currency values, or averages. The third type is string. A string is a sequence of alphanumeric characters, which means it can contain letters, numbers, symbols, or even spaces. In PHP, strings are always enclosed in single or double quotes. For example, hello world and language are both strings. Strings are extremely common in web development because they're used to handle text-based data like names, messages, or form input. Finally, we have the Boolean data type. Booleans represent true or false values. They are used in conditions and logical operations. In PHP, we usually assign them like this, x true, or y false. Booleans are essential for controlling program flow, such as when writing if-else statements or testing conditions. So, to summarize, integers are for whole numbers, floats are for decimal numbers, strings are for text and characters, and Booleans are for true or false logic. Now let's take a look at Figure 3.1, Data Type Classification in PHP. This diagram helps us understand how PHP organizes its different types of data. As you can see at the top, everything starts with data types in PHP, which are divided into three main categories: scalar types, compound types, and special types. Let's break each of these down. Scalar types. These are the simplest or most basic data types in PHP. They represent single values and cannot be broken down into smaller parts. Under scalar types, we have integer, which represents whole numbers, float, which represents numbers with decimal points, boolean, which holds either true or false, and string, which stores text or characters. These four are the foundation of PHP data handling. Compound types. These data types can hold multiple values or even complex data structures. Under compound types, we have array, which can store a group of related values in a single variable, and object, which represents an instance of a class in object-oriented PHP. Compound types are very useful when working with collections of data or creating dynamic web applications. Special types. These are unique data types used for special purposes in PHP. We have null, which represents a variable that has no value at all, and resource, which refers to external resources, such as a database connection or an open file. So in summary, PHP organizes data types into three groups: scalar, compound, and special, to make it easier for developers to handle different kinds of information efficiently. In the next section, we'll start exploring each data type in more detail, beginning with integers, one of the most commonly used data types in PHP programming. Now let's move on to section 3.2, integers. In PHP, an integer represents a whole number, which means it does not include any decimal or fractional part. Integers can be positive, negative, or even zero. For example, numbers like 5, 0, and 250 are all integers. One important thing to remember is that the integer data type in PHP is platform dependent. That means the range of values it can store depends on the type of system your PHP program is running on. On a 32-bit system, integers can range from 2,147, 483, 648 to 2,147, 483, 647, while on 64-bit systems, the range is even larger, allowing PHP to handle much bigger numbers. The integer data type is commonly used to represent numerical values that don't require decimals. For example, you can use integers to store product quantities in an inventory, the number of students in a class, population counts in a city, or even scores in a game. In short, whenever you need to work with whole numbers in PHP, you'll be using the integer data type. Next, we'll look at a simple PHP code snippet that demonstrates how integers are used in an actual script.